Are you looking for some fast, easy ways to use your 6x8 pattern paper? Hi, I'm Jess from JessCrafts.com, and I'm here to help you make the most of your crafty supplies and time. So let's get making. Today I have 6x8 paper busting template number 24. I have 30 designs for how to create A2 cards with 6x8 patterned paper. Some of them are available for free at JessCrafts.com for you to download, but you can find them all in a pack in the Etsy shop as well. Today's template is very, very simple, so I will tell you very clearly what the measurements are so that if you would like to write them down and recreate the card, even if you don't have the templates, you should be able to. So I'm taking the scrapbook.com Sunkissed patterned collection. Because today's sketch has some really large pieces in it, I think it's an opportunity to use one of the larger patterns from a collection. So I think of something like this blue dot. Even if you cut it into some pretty small bits, you can kind of, you're gonna know what it is. These starfish, sorry, I couldn't think of the name for them all of a sudden. They're a little bit smaller scale, so they could work in some smaller pieces, but they have the palm trees on the back, so they could be a good candidate as well. But thinking about like how the scale of your paper, this plaid with the plain orange on the background, that could work for many, many cards. But today, since I have this larger one, I'm going with this larger scale pattern. Okay, so we are going to start by cutting it according to the directions on the template. When working with tools like paper trimmers, please follow all manufacturer safety instructions. We'll start with a 6x8 pattern paper. This paper isn't quite directional because the different like seashells and starfish are facing in different directions. So it doesn't quite like look upside down if you were to turn it this way, but I can kind of tell this is supposed to be the top. I just wanted to assure you though, if you do have clearly directional pattern paper, like say the palm trees, that will work for this sketch as well. You start by cutting it in half to 3x8 inches. And then there's only one more cut per side. We are going to cut this 8-inch piece at 5.5, and that will give us a piece that is remaining that is 3x2.5. As you can see, there's some seashells on the back that are also a little bit of a larger scale print. And so both of these work really well. I think I am going to turn it over and use both sides, but you can always make that decision, and you can see that it would work well with single-sided paper. Again, cut it at 5.5. You're also going to need to cut some cardstock mats. Both of our pieces are 3 inches wide, and I like to make my mats a 1/4 inch bigger, so they're going to take a 3 1/4 inch mats. But also, the background piece is already 5.5, which is the full length of an A2 size card. So I'm actually only going to make it a 1/4 inch bigger on the sides. So it'll be 3 1/4 by 5.5. And then the other mat that I need is we have a 3x2.5 inch piece. So the mat will be 3 1/4 by 2 3/4. So a 1/4 inch bigger on both sides. For this particular cardstock that I've chosen, I do have a few scraps. I unfortunately don't think I'm going to be able to cut all the mats that I need out of them, but I do always recommend that you start with your scraps. And my no scrap templates refers just to the patterned paper scraps. There will be cardstock scraps. So I'm going to cut this piece to 3 1/4 by 11. And then if I cut it in half at 5.5, I should get the 2 mats that I need with no scraps. So, and I have a really substantial scrap here. And then the smaller pieces that I need, I will start with my scraps. I'll first see if any of my scraps just happens to be 3 1/4. I didn't think so, but this one, if it happens to be 2 3/4 on one side, didn't really work out. So I'm gonna take this to 2 3/4, and then I'm gonna cut it to 3 1/4, and again at 3 1/4. So I have the 2 mats that I need. So next up, I want to think about embellishing my card. I have this stamp set from Fawn called Shello Friend. I like it because I think that it works for like all ages and genders. Like a lot of people are going to think these little fish are cute. Has a lot of great punny sentiments. I like the Shello Friend, but also it says you're a fantastic friend, but I think that I'm going to cut this stamp apart and use your fantastic on cards. So I had a scrap of paper. This doesn't happen to me very often, but when I opened this pack of patterned paper, I did have a scrap from a previous project. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to show you a way that I like to use stamps that doesn't involve coloring. And so I have stamped the fish on the patterned paper, and then rather than coloring it in, I'm going to let that pattern add some interest and use the coordinating dies to cut them out. I don't always buy coordinating dies, but these ones were quite small. I figured it might be kind of difficult to fussy cut them. So I am going to cut out a bunch of fish to use, and I also did stamp it in Lawn Fawn fake tan ink, just so that it also added some interest by not being stamped just in black, but adding a little bit of color. The other thing that you could do though, so if you didn't have a scrap, because you are using a no scrap method, is I would consider stamping your image, whatever it is. I know you might not be working the same collection, but still you can apply these ideas to another situation. Is you could take your image and you could stamp it where the pattern paper is going to cover your mat. And now I am having, like, I have orange on orange here, but I still think that looks cute. And again, I would not have to color these because I'm already using a colored cardstock. And I could take my die, cut these out, and then when I put my piece of pattern paper over it, you won't know that there's any holes behind here. So it's another like no scrap way of using stamps without having to color. I wanted to point out one last idea. I don't think it works well for me today, in my particular situation, but this patterned paper, I'm actually going to cover a piece of the patterned paper with the other piece of patterned paper. So like this little chunk that's behind here, you're not gonna see if there was a hole in it. So if this paper was also good for your stamp, you could stamp on here, run it through the die cut machine, cut out your images, and then cover that as well. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't, like I said, it's not gonna work for me today because this is a very busy background, but another choice. I wanted to take a look at the sentiment for a moment too. I'm going to cut apart my stamps. They don't scream. Sorry, I made that joke before, but like it's okay, you can. However, it's your choice. Like I don't want, if something happens to your stamp or something like that, you're kind of at your own risk here, but I have successfully cut apart my stamps and I have been able to like fit them back together to use it. So I'm cutting off the A, and it says A Fantastic Friend. Those are all attached in this stamp set. And I have decided it is worth it. I will use the You're Fantastic more than You're a Fantastic Friend. So I'm gonna cut off the Fantastic. But then I can place that sentiment here on this banner strip. So I cut this out of the same mats. So here is a mat that I was going to cover up. And so I cut the two, and that way that's all like perfectly coordinated because it's the same orange cardstock I'm going to be using later on, or like for the mats. And I think it's probably straight, but this is background thing here. So I took a piece of heavyweight cardstock. This is painter's tape, it's sticky. And so I cut out my like most used banner dies and I added the sticky tape, and so that's gonna hold this in place as I stamp this down so that I can stamp multiple exactly the same way, and I don't have to like try to get the magnet on the edge of this little banner. Instead, it's being held on by tape. So I don't think I've shared this in a while. I've definitely shared it in the past, but I thought I would mention it again just in case you haven't seen a video for a while, or this is, it could always be your first video too, in which case, welcome. Thank you for coming to my channel. I hope that you enjoy this. But I can now stamp it a few times till I get a great image because this is a brand new stamp. You can use like a stamp conditioning tool, like I use a piece of leather. I find that works, but again, think about what's best for you and your supplies. So I have You're Fantastic, and then just to show you how it works, I can easily peel that off. It's low tack painter's tape, so I don't have to worry about it ripping my cardstock. It doesn't in my experience. And as you can see, it's quite dirty. So that helps it not stick as well. So sorry but that's just like little bits of cardstock over time. And then I place the next one in and I can stamp it again, especially if I liked the way the first one looked. And then I have my sentiments. All right, so now that I've made giant mess all over the desk, as you can see, I am ready to assemble all of the pieces into the final card. I have a grid mat that you can use to help line things up when you want it to be even on both sides and straight. Then I will place my background pattern paper down, covering the places where I cut out those sentiment strips. And same thing here, I stamped and cut out some of the fish, but I'm going to be able to just cover that right up, even though I didn't even use one of the fish. Again, no one will be the wiser, except for you all. So now I am ready for my sentiment and embellishments. I have 2 pieces of thick cardstock glued together, and I'm going to use that for, like, instead of foam tape, I call it fake foam tape. You can, if you have a small piece of scrap from whatever you're working with, you can use it as well. Like if you think this might be too small for a mat, go ahead and you can cut it in half, glue the 2 pieces together and use that. This is just one from a different previous project. And I think I want to do something like popping up the sentiment and maybe one of the fish. I haven't really like played with the layout too much, so I'll try not to fuss too much with this, but on these smaller embellishments, I do sometimes switch to liquid glue. I do use my tape runner a lot, but I also know you can't get the Scotch, I'm pretty sure you can't get a Scotch ATG any longer, which is what I use, last time I checked anyway. So, okay, then I'm gonna center the sentiment because that looks like it, you know, it's a good size for centering. And then I'm gonna use the rule of 3s. So I think 3 fish will look better than 2 fish or 1 fish. So if I do 1 fish, I think that would be fine, but he's really small. So if I do 2 fish, I think it's okay because you could go, oh, it's 2 embellishments and a sentiment, so it's kind of still the rule of 3s. But because I had only enough scraps to cut 4 of these yellow ones, and I want, and I have 2 cards, I thought, well, I can't do 3 of the yellow, but now I have it left where it's like, oh, you know, is the orange balanced with the yellow? I think if I do it that way, like a pattern, that could look cute, but I'm also thinking if I do the 3 fish kind of swimming across the card like this, that will help it be balanced because there's 2 yellow and 2 orange. You can kind of keep messing with them, see, you know, maybe you like to mix it up in some different ways, but just putting those 3 fish embellishments onto the card. So I have my 2 finished cards. I did actually have an extra yellow fish. I thought I only had 4, but I had 5. So I could have done that instead, but I did decide to pop up the 2 orange fish similar to the sentiment. And on the second card, I thought about having the fish kind of interacting with each other a bit. I thought it might make them look more like they're swimming across the card if I had one in front of another one. And so if I could go back, these are pretty well glued down now, I would do that to both cards. I do think it makes it look interesting. In general, I think that can be helpful. Like even if I was working with a slightly larger embellishment, tucking it behind the sentiment tends to look good. So I'm very happy with the way these 2 cards turned out. It can be very fast and simple because I didn't do any coloring and because I'm using large pieces of pattern paper, but I'm showing you a couple of different ways of approaching a no scrap, like we were cutting out some elements from the pattern paper or from the cardstock mats. If you found this video helpful, here's another video where you can find more ideas for enjoying your crafty time and supplies. Let me know you like this video with a share to your crafty community. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next template or tutorial, and check the video description for product links. See you in the next video.